The Celtics take a 3-game losing streak into tonight's showdown with the Eastern Conference leading Raptors. It's here on ESPN, but Terry Rozier knows exactly what is wrong with Boston. They are too talented. Rozier adding, the players on this team have never been on a team like this. Stephen A., your face is telling me you don't agree with this statement.
No, that's not telling you that it's just that it goes far beyond that. He's not wrong with what he's saying. But that's Brad Stevens' job to handle that. You knew what the talent was coming into this season. And I'm going to stay on this point until the cows come home. The reality is that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they've been up and down this season. They need to be more consistent. They need to play better. Obviously, Kyrie Irving has to be a bit more sensitive because you can't treat everybody the same way. Leaders recognize who they're dealing with. It's not just about being who you are. It's about knowing your personnel, per se, and recognizing that you can't say the same thing to everybody. Some people are going to take certain messages differently, and motivational tactics are not going to work the same for everybody. But ultimately, this comes down to Brad Stevens and Danny Ainge insistent and committed to reingratiating Gordon Hayward into the proceedings. He's a damn good player, but their success last year was predicated on pushing the ball up the floor, constantly being in attack mode. And when Gordon Hayward is on the floor, sometimes you've got to wait for him. He can't yet run with those guys. We all know why, because of the nasty injury that he's recovering from. So I'm not trying to throw any kind of shade on Gordon Hayward or even Brad Stevens for looking out for him and trying to bring him along, et cetera, et cetera. But that has a lot to do with why Boston hasn't been effective offensively. You pointed out yesterday, Max, how elite defensively they had been up until the last 2 or 3 games. They had been relatively elite defensively. So that's not their problem. Their problem is on the offensive side of the ball, and I think that has a lot to do with Brad Stevens, and he's got to figure those things out, more so than the talent on the roster.
Look, we got to make the distinction between an excuse and an explanation. An excuse is like, well, this is why it's going wrong. You throw up your hand. An explanation is like, this has not been going well, and here's a reason why. And he's absolutely right. Of course, they're struggling because of being, in a way, overly talented, too deep. That is on Brad Stevens. Figure that out, coach. Can't be the next Popovich and people talking about the reason they're not doing better is because they're too talented.
And that's all
That said, the examples that you pointed out are instructive. Tatum and Jaylen Brown have been struggling this year compared to last year. And we all knew the reason last year they were really good is because they got all that extra burn because of Hayward's injury, right? So these are, listen, they're both number 3 overall picks in successive years or in 2 out of 3 years. They're high-end talent that got to develop because of Hayward's injury. Then what happens? Kyrie goes down. Terry Rozier, talented guy. He gets burned, and he does well. And the whole question this year is when these guys come back, what's going to happen? And this is what's happening. So it's an explanation. It is no excuse. But I do agree with Terry Rozier.